Monarch, Victoria, was crowned. This should have marked the end of the story of slavery. In fact, the Victorians replaced shackles of iron with the poison of racial prejudice.
At all levels of society, there were voluntary associations between black people and white people. At the level of the aristocracy, for example, you have the famous case of Soubise, the servant of the Duchess of Queensberry.
In this society, some black people became well-known figures in their own right.
Right, as well. So your child gets to be free. The same child that is there because of Ray gets to be free. And if the child, if you keep that child, you're allowed to keep that child there, and you're awarded a certain amount of freedom, right? You can now go and live over there. That's your land. That child is the only person who's entitled to that land. So what our children were doing was enslaving us as well.
Records show that high proportions of emancipated slaves were mulatto. As time went on, more and more mixed-race heritage slaves began to exist. Some that were completely white had figured out that it was easy to escape slavery because they could simply flee north and change their names.
My father went to his grave never knowing my mom's secret. My mom was an absolutely stunningly beautiful woman.
1944, after the war, Harold Kalina married Elvira Frederick. They settled in a working-class neighborhood in Parma, Ohio. In 1946, their daughter Gail was born. Gail says her mother mystified her in some ways.
She would wear a light foundation makeup to bed at night, which I thought was a little strange.
So a lot of these people you see on the land and you think they're native Indians, they're actually mixed race children.
She would never go out in the sun unless she had a wide brim hat. She would cover her hands with gloves. Really didn't like to be in the sun.
Who enslaved their own people so they could keep some of the fortune. If you had a drop, even if some of them looked very white, because it can happen. Our family got mixed race people in it and they don't look half black, half white. They look Indian, or they look white, or they look Chinese. Slave's child, the child's father, the slave master died, the land would be ripped away from them and they'd be dashed out.
Today, thousands of Britons are discovering their own part in the shameful history of Britain's slave trade. A history which is only now forcing its way back into our consciousness.
Growing up, Gail never saw one photo of her grandfather. She decided to search for his identity.
At first, I couldn't find him. I put in the 1900 Louisiana census records, and suddenly I see the name Azima Frederick. And I noticed something else very curious. Next to all their names is the letter B, what it stands for, and it says race. So B, does that mean black?
At the level of the aristocracy, for example, you have the famous case of Soubise, servant of the Duchess of Queensberry, who was a man of great flamboyance, a youth of great flamboyance, very handsome. All the kitchen wenches wanted him. But he also had this relationship, which became a scandal at the time, with the Duchess. He had to be sent to India. He was banished to India.
When his owner died, he was passed to a new master, one of England's leading authors, Samuel Johnson.
Samuel Johnson's an interesting character because he was one of the finest, perhaps the finest mind of his time, and he had strong, strong feelings about race and slavery. He violently opposed.
But if you happen to look white, even then, there was a period of time where if you happened to own some land and let's say someone white in the community knew that you had black in you, they would rip the land from you. You weren't allowed to have it based on the fact that you had one drop of black blood in you.
Francis Barber's son was Samuel. Samuel's son was Isaac. Isaac's son was Enoch. Enoch's son was William Edward. William Edward's son was Albert. Dennis, is Albert's son.
So what's been written into laws and history is the disrespect of the black mother. So it was never, to claim being black was never a good thing. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. Claiming any form of blackness meant that you went hungry, you weren't entitled to anything. And so, therefore, that's another dynamic of a fractured family unit. And this is why you get some people that are mixed race and think they're better than their parents, because that has always been the case.
Mom, how come you wear makeup to bed? And she said, well, Gail, you know, you never know if you would get sick in the middle of the night. And you always want to look your best because you'll get treated better at the hospital.
She marries your dad, how he was a bigoted man.
And so,
only imagine how that made her feel.
I think I mean, she would say, like, oh, hell, you know, you really shouldn't talk that way. But she wasn't like, oh, you cannot talk that way. I think she had to, you know, dial it back a little because she didn't want to give herself away.
It's starting to make sense now. And then people say, you sure it's about racism?
Mother wanted a better life for herself, and the way she saw that was to pass for white, that she would have more opportunities, you know, employment-wise or just in society in general. So I think, but to do that, she had to turn her back on her mixed-race heritage.
So it's about race. This is what your country was built on. Water plecker is the reason why when you go to the doctors or you fill in a job application, you have to put what nationality you are, what colour, what do you class yourself as. Ask me again, are you sure it's about race? You know, the cognitive dissonance that's going on in society needs to be addressed. Books.
Yeah, so there's been a few novels, Shakespeare times, they would make novels to help white people understand what it is to be a mulatto. So the term that they would use is the tragic mulatto. It's a stereotypical fictional character that appeared in American literature during the 19th and 20th centuries. From the 1840s, the tragic mulatto is an archetypical mixed-race person who is assumed to be sad or even suicidal because they fail to completely fit in the white world or the black world. Now, I hear a lot of my mixed race friends who say this.
Your sister?
My sister. Well, she
doesn't
don't
say
understand
it,
right now.
You do have a mixed race sister.
Obviously, I have a mixed
No,
race
she
sister.
has had issues. Remember, she was going to school, and then the kids were asking her why her hair's curly.
The Asian little youths.
Yeah.
The black kids wouldn't really do that to her.
Well, obviously the black kids weren't, but the white kids and the
The white
Indian
kids
kids,
and the Asian kids
they're
would
taking
say
the mix.
stuff.
Right, this is for the black thing that started on me earlier. The state of your hair. Serious. What colour I am, and I prefer to be this colour than yours. And at least with my fake tan, that colour washes off, but your colour ain't coming off.
Melanin repairs your DNA, and DNA is the structure for replication of the information in your cells. It's the sort of the hard drive of your cellular computer in the nucleus.
That's the thing with our family. I think maybe because we're all mixed, we accept her. Although we did have a few family members that would give her problems, she's never not felt like she's not accepted in the black world.
That's very true. In the black world, that is very true.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true.
But then even then, it's hard to say because on her side, her white side, they love her off.
Well, they don't really see.
They don't really see her.
But you see, that's the next subject, because is that really about... Because there's the next thing that I find mixed race people do, and yes, I keep saying it, I have a mixed race daughter, but I don't subscribe to the nonsense. That you suddenly become, you're not white, you're not just white, and you're not black. You're exotic.
Belonged to Queen Elizabeth I. It's really the only garment of clothing we have left from her reign that she actually wore herself. Over that went your bum roll, but you'll see now it's sort of like a massive donut.
Yeah, get out.
So when you've got that curly hair, it's exotic. But if you're black and you've got the same hair, you're not exotic, you're ugly. And if you've got a little bit, and then you've got white, mixed race girls, behaving like they're better than their own mothers or fathers. But
I don't know how that works.
because of the mindset, because that's how it was.
It's just slave men.
It's colonialized. Yeah, if you didn't know, now you know. What you're doing is you're just being racist. You don't have the power and the prejudice, because racism is based on having the power and the prejudice to exert that power.
But the thing is, some of the mulattoes were made because maybe like the slave women or slave men would do it to avoid field work in it, or
That's
to
right.
make their children have a better
Life.
because the child slaves would get either killed or sold off.
Yeah,
So-
or they were used in a sexual way as well.
Exactly.
So if you've got grandparents or great grandparents, you've got to realise that this stuff
It was
didn't happen
happening
that
in
far
their
ago.
time, yeah.
The 50s, 1950s and 60s is not. If your parents are like near to 60, or your grandparents, then this was happening recently. This is what you got to understand. This stuff, it hasn't been addressed. It's still going on. And then, like we'd said on one of our conversations, you've got black people also. This is why you get. I can understand some people will look at me as a black woman and say traitor, sellout, coon, and I understand it, because if you understand your history, and one thing that people forget, especially.
But then again, they're still going by the slave master mentality.
Yeah, it is a
By saying
colonialised
that.
mix. But on top of it, though, it's experience.
Yeah, of course.
You got to understand, to break this thing, you've got to understand history. It makes you understand your parents. Remember, I've been brought up in a very pro-black way. So when somebody pro-black comes and tries to at me, you're disgusting, you're a dog, you're lying down with a dog and all those things, you got to understand, we were brought up believing that. So you're not, when you're coming at somebody like me, I never got with my child's father based on needing land or needing anything, number one. Number two, I don't hate myself.
Exactly.
Remember, in that period of time, black women were using the rape to their advantage.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier.
And I'm quite aware that there are people that get in, black people that get in mixed relationships or sing the black women are ugly song because of the same thing, because it's like disassociating yourself from this stigma that black is negative, black is ugly, black is poor, black is all these things. Economically, it wasn't in your favour to be black. But that doesn't mean you get a pass, because if you know your history, you know the truth is that this is all projection. This animalistic behaviour was that of the white man. I'm going to just say it as it is. But you've been celebrating it for so long, you've erected statues with people that you call like Alexander the Great. He was great because he murdered off a load of black people and robbed their land. Christopher Columbus was from Italy. He was a European. And then you've got Europeans pushing this same agenda. He was great because he robbed land off black people, killed them off, raped them, robbed them. And this is what you've been celebrating and been getting away with it. And then on top of it saying, nigger, black, no, you can't have this job, get out of my shop. This is all the nonsense you've been, cognitive dissonance. Makes no sense. But what I'm saying is this, so I can totally understand why somebody black will look at me and say, dishonor. And I've had that in my family. When I first got with my child's father, I didn't want to accept how I felt about him. It was very difficult.
It puts you in turmoil.
I didn't let her Eden meet him for months. Although there was mixed relationships going on in my family for a long time, I was brought up very pro-black. And Eden's father is very black, and I love black men. Suddenly people think, oh, you don't like black men. But you have to realise that your colour does not determine your mentality. And then I met this white man whose mother was born in Uganda, raised in Nigeria, and lives in Jamaica. And he was raised in Jamaica and has a black stepfather and black grandparents. And so he totally destroyed my not only my experience, my ideas of, because my stereotypes, my experience up until that point was I hated white people because of what I'd been through. I understand that there are people that get in mixed relationships and act like, oh, I've arrived now, I'm going the white way. There's people in my family that did it. I saw it. Suddenly I'm part of the upper class club. I hope nobody sees me and realizes that I am still black.
Niggers, Jews, homosexuals, Mexicans, Arabs, and all kinds of different chanks stink, and I hate it.
You know, you're not fooling anyone, but the mentality, I get it.
There still are those black people that like...
Well, first of all, they're lazy, good-for-nothing tricksters, crack-smoking swindlers, big butt having, wide nose breathing all the white man's air.
Get with white people, and then all of a sudden, black women are ugly or black men are ugly, and you're just like, but you came from a black woman, you came from a black man, so how does this mentality work?
What if I were to tell you that you are an African American?
Sir, listen, I'm going to make this clear. I'm in no way, shape, or form involved in any niggerdom.
That birth certificate, and there in parentheses were 3 letters, COL. Would you please explain to me what that means? They sent me a very official letter back, and they said, COL is for colored,